Have you ever felt not good enough, not tall enough, not smart enough, not skinny enough? Well, that's the subject of today's episode on The Courage to Be with Carrie Severson, author of Unapologetically Enough. We covered so many juicy topics that I know you'll love. Welcome to the Courage to Be podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Vasallo. And each week, I will bring you amazing guests so that you can tap into the courage to break out of old patterns and live your soul's purpose. Before we get into this episode, if by the end you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, review, and share the podcast so we can reach more people. Because here's the thing, I'm on a mission to close the gender gap in the podcasting world so that more and more women's voices are heard. If you feel that this is something you value too, then please take action by rating, reviewing, following, and sharing the podcast. We can only do this together. Check out the link in the show notes to see how this is done. And make sure to stay until the end to claim some free gifts I have for you. Welcome back to The Courage to Be, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And today we have Carrie Severson with us. Welcome, Carrie.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm excited to dive in. I don't even know where to start. I want to say, tell us about your journey, because that's how I usually start with people. But you have this book that caught my attention from the beginning, Unapologetically Enough. How did you, because that's what got me in, you know, you're a publisher, you own a publishing company, you have your book. How do you get to where you're at and the work that you're doing? So share with us, please.
Sure. Well, I'm an entrepreneur, have been for more than a decade. And my first business was, well, first and foremost, I've always been in the storytelling space. I grew up bullied as a kid, and I wanted to change where the spotlight landed so that women were treating women better and girls were treating girls better. So it's really always been my driving why since I was 19 years old. I went off to college for journalism specifically because I figured if I could adjust where the spotlight landed and feature a variety of people, we would be a much better society. And so that was a long time ago. And I've always been, working on that journey really. But so I've been a writer, professional writer for decades. And I took a step back, went into all sorts of aspects of storytelling, journalism, essay writing, blogging, website development, publicity, and really got away from that why and that driving force for about 5 years. And one day had a really bad day at work, hated what I was doing, and was like, I have to come back to my why. I have to come back to why, this driving force I had when I was a kid. Took a journal, wrote down questions I didn't know the answers to, like, how do I live out my purpose? What am I supposed to do with my life? And this company was birthed through me. It was a nonprofit organization, a girl on girl bullying solutions organization. I created it in 2011. And it was like God's timing. It was like right place, right time. Created this beautiful, creative organization, and it just caught on fire because at the time I created it, Michelle Obama had just launched StopBullying.gov. First Lady of Phoenix just launched Stop Bullying AZ. And it was right place, right time, right product, blew up. I burned out about 4 years in, and I had relationships all over the country. We were creating workshops for all sorts of businesses and schools, organizations, training facilitators all over. And to heal from burnout, I came back to my roots of storytelling. So Unapologetically Enough came about because, like storytellers do, we tend to share things. We tend to share our scars. We tend to share things that we've just come through publicly. So I was given plenty of opportunities to talk about my burnout journey. This was like back before everyone was burnt out, back in 2014, before burnout was a word that, was a buzzword even. And by sharing my journey, both on stage and in the written form, people all over the world responded. And because it had such a global response, I looked at it as this is something I should turn into a book, unapologetically enough. So I spent a lot of years writing this, spent a lot of years pitching this to literary agents. And this work has been compared to Eat, Pray, Love. It's been compared to Carry On. It's been compared to Daring Greatly, these huge New York Times bestselling books. And agents would always say, it was like a backhanded compliment. It reminds me of Eat, Pray, Love, but because you don't have 100,000 followers or a million followers like Elizabeth Gilbert, I'm passing on it. So I created the Unapologetic Voice House, which is my publishing house, specifically for people like me who have great stories, are lifetime storytellers, and don't have big platforms, but still have an important message that they want to get out to the world. And my book is just one of them that I've published.
This is great. Where did unapologetically enough come from for you?
Well, okay. So the word enough was a trigger word for me actually while I was in burnout, because it was something that I looked at as a negative. It was never enough. I was never enough. I didn't have enough time. I didn't have enough money. So it was something that I had to actually heal. And I did inner work on that, right? That is a worthiness thing. The word unapologetic came to me for my 40th birthday because I got tired of being compared to these huge New York Times bestselling authors and then being told it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. You didn't have enough followers. I got tired of trying to be somebody else or apologize for the journey I had, and got specifically tired of having to somehow defend my work. And so those two pieces sort of came together as my declaration for who I am and what I do. And what's so fantastic is over the last year that my book has been out, so many women specifically have been able to identify with both those words together, which is very fun.
I love it. I think it's such a powerful title, because
Thank you.
so many of us have that limiting belief of not being enough. Whether it's you're not good enough, you're not tall enough, you're not small enough, you're not young enough, you're not old enough, like if fill in the blank, we all have it one way or another. And yes, it's enough is enough of having to apologize for it. So I appreciate you sharing that and your journey of how you came together. And you're just mentioning that many women have identified with that. You also mentioned at the beginning that one of your big whys since you were young was that you wanted girls to treat girls better. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it's all connected? Were you not treated right as a girl? Like, where did all that come? And where's that thread that connects to nowadays?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the 80s. I'm close to 5'9". I've had really big curly hair. I'm curvy, and growing up in the 80s, I've looked like this since I was 10 years old. In the 80s, there wasn't people I could identify with. I didn't look like Cyndi Lauper. I didn't look like Cindy Crawford. And if you remember the 80s in the United States, that was the genre of like the supermodel. It wasn't just a model, it was a supermodel. We put these women on pedestals, and it was actually very toxic and very damaging for a young girl. And so, I didn't look like those role models that everyone had, and was sort of ostracized because of that. Started, I actually write about this in my book, but that really started in second grade. I had a hard time really sort of being accepted for, I was the tallest kid in class. I was always the basketball center. And then in seventh grade really is when my fight or flight sort of kicked in, because the, ostracizing turned into like threats, and it crossed that line of bullying on an ongoing basis into feeling unsafe. And so I grew up really wanting to change. And that is a regular pattern for girls still to this day. I mean, bullying still happens, right? So I did what I could to create an organization that would create empathy skills, teach empathy skills, communication skills, and we did that through play and creativity. We created a trainer program, taught facilitators around the country on how to implement an after school program for girls to teach them how to befriend a girl that wasn't like them. And that was a ton of work. That was very hard. That was like a good decade of my life. Today, so many women identify with this unapologetically enough concept because I think, especially after coming through COVID, so many women were taxed with so much more than what they normally do. Right, where kids are at home, we're working from home, and yet we still have all these home responsibilities and then the business responsibilities. And the burnout statistic numbers for the United States are astronomical. Generation by generation, it impacts everyone. And this concept of accepting our own enoughness is really at the root of why we're so tired, why we're so fatigued, why we're so burnt out, why we're still so sick. And so it is sort of striking a nerve. And because the book is written and geared towards women, I can only speak to my women audience and women readers, but it is striking a nerve, and I'm grateful that it's helping them move through that.
How much do you think is been inherited from patriarchy and the way our society has been set up?
Yeah, I think a lot. I feel like we're still trying to shift it and crack it. I think that's probably why the divorce rate went as high as it did during COVID, because women were coming, they were, working from home and still being, it was still anticipated or expected that they would take on the home responsibilities as well as all the daily chores and all the things that we do, as well as full-time work and full-time parenting. Yeah, I think it's something that we're still trying to fix or reverse.
Do you see that changing in our lifetime or in another generation?
I don't know. Again, because I study burnout, and the millennial generation is the most burnt out generation right now. And then I think Gen Z is after them, right?
Mhm.
And I bet, you know what? I bet it does change in our lifetime. I do think that Gen Z is watching all of these patterns and all these shifts. And they were so impacted by COVID. They were the ones that were being taken out of school and being forced to work or do school at home in the computers. And even the younger generation after that, I think things will change moving forward as we're starting to grow out of it.
How do you think this whole not enoughness, and I'll come back to burnout, but I just don't want to forget this question, this whole not enoughness, as you were sharing in the 80s and not
Yeah.
fitting in, you're taller, you're curvier, you got the big curly hair. I can identify. I think every woman or every girl at some point just doesn't identify, like we don't fit into certain roles, because like yourself, I'm also 5'10". I was the tallest in the class for many years until the boys started catching up, and we just have different things, like that we don't fit in. I'm bicultural. I have a Spanish father, an American mother, so there's always going to be something where you don't identify or fit in. But I feel like the advantage that we had in our generation was that there was no social media. How
Totally.
do you think social media is affecting the girls nowadays? I mean, the girls nowadays, the advantages that they do have is that there are more role models, that they can see other women that look like them, whether it's color, whether it's shape, whether it's size, like whatever it is, that we tend to have some more role models. Maybe not enough yet, but the disadvantage that these girls have now growing up
Yeah.
is social media. And it's really scary for me, Carrie, upbringing my daughter that's still young and hasn't entered that world. What can you say about this? Like how, like Yeah, just what can you share about it? Because I have so many questions of like, what can we do for our girls growing up? Because the statistics are horrible for these girls, their
They are.
self-confidence, the anxiety, the depression.
They are. Well, social media definitely plays a role in worthiness issues, right? Enoughness issues, and it does play a role in bullying. It's one of the ways that girls bully other girls. It's a psychological thing for them. And when I was running the nonprofit and when we were running workshops, we talked about this was back in like 2017. We talked about Instagram was a really big thing back then, and how many girls had Instagram accounts, how many parents were monitoring those accounts, and girls would talk about not being invited to a party and finding out on Instagram that they weren't invited and all that jazz, right? It's gotten worse through all these other apps and all the different ones that parents have to find out about from their kids, particularly the ones where it's like it's a chat room that's constantly going as an app. And obviously the hashtags and stuff, I mean, it's just insane. All we can really do as parents is to instill and help our kids understand their worth, understand their value, give them so many tools so that they are able to make great decisions. And I'm not above parental control. I'm not above monitoring that stuff. I'm not above changing passwords. I'm not above all those things, because as much as we want to be able to give the kids freedom and let them make, memories and all that, sometimes it's good to have a work on your foundational skills and grow your roots before you're out without understanding what the right choice is.
What suggestions would you have for parents that have the girls that are going into these ages
Social
and
media.
yeah.
So I have 5 nieces and I have stepsons, but the girls specifically, all their social media is monitored by their parents, and it's on a very, there's some social media channels that they aren't allowed on until they're 18. And so as a minor, the ones that are image focused, images have to be cleared before they're posted by parents for like nudity purposes and stuff like that. Who It's a private account, it's not a public account. Some of those things, honestly, really being involved. It's something that you have to monitor pretty consistently.
How do the girls feel about that? Have you encountered it or talked with the girls, as part of like when you've been in with the foundation and all that?
They accept it, particularly because, all of the scams that happen, the money scams, the come out and meet me scams, the let's get together scams, all of these things, like emphasizing the dangers of it and the predatory components of it and the nudity aspect of it, like being able to monitor your camera and hacking and all that jazz. Like it really is, they look at it as a simple tool to connect to their friends. And then all of the dangers that are behind it are something that have to be explained to the point of they're annoyed. And I know, I understand, stop talking about it, but it has to be a conversation.
And at what age would you recommend to start those kind of conversations? Is it tweens? Is it teens already too late? Like at what age do you start? I feel like with kids nowadays, it's just they're becoming older, much younger, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like I see my daughter, and when I was 10, I wasn't playing with Barbies because I didn't play with Barbies, but I was playing with trucks and Legos and Playmobil, and
Hmm.
these kids
Us
are
too.
like
Yeah.
looking at their image and, like they're learning at a much faster pace. So I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts? At what age do you start having these conversations and planting those seeds for them
Well,
to understand?
so all of our programs were implemented for middle school specifically. It was 2 and 8th grade reading level, but we would even start I mean, fifth grade in some schools was middle school. We were asked to work with a couple of third and fourth graders, and they were still in that trying to figure out their hierarchy. And that was the like real psychological nastiness that was happening in school. Once they got into middle school, a lot of them did have social media at that point. And you know what? Unfortunately, like so many, I mean, they're smart. They figure out a way to like start a different account and, go behind their parents' backs and things like that. And so a lot of those things were happening, even though their accounts were monitored by their parents. So the conversation should definitely start in middle school, giving your kids. I mean, I have friends who have kids that are in high school that still don't have access to stuff like that. And they're okay. The kids are, you know, they're still in clubs, they still go to school, they still have friends, they're still out, and they don't care that they're missing out on posts on social media. But if it were me, I would wait as long as I could to give my kids access to social media.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's been our constant talk with her. Well, let's do a shift here. Although what's coming to me is I just read an article recently about teenage kids going back to smartphones. I mean, to flip phones instead of smartphones. Have you read
Yep.
about this?
Yes. Same thing with them going from ebooks back to physical books. Like they're so tired of their screens because of again, because of COVID, of having to sit in front of their screen and then communicate with their screen for so long. Like they're shifting out of that. And that's fantastic. I think that's that Gen Z generation.
That's great. I hope it keeps on going in that way because what movie was it? The Social Dilemma. Did you ever watch that movie? I think it's on Netflix.
Yes.
It is a scary movie, like for any parent, of just seeing the amount of anxiety that social media creates for the kids, the comparison, the bullying, the
Mhm.
just everything, like the imagery. Even the kids said that if their friends didn't have phones and social media accounts, that they would prefer that. But they've just gotten hooked into this whole world. So when I read that article about smartphones being, pushed to the side and being substituted by the flip phones, that we started out with, I was like, yes, we're doing good. And I didn't know about them going back to physical books. So this is wonderful. And I hope that it keeps on going in that direction, that they can kind of put a stake on the ground with that. So thank you for sharing all this. We deviated a little bit, but because you had been talking about girls, treating girls better and where that came from. But I want to talk a little bit about burnout because you started with this foundation and it was very successful. And look at all the things that you taught.
Mhm.
What led you to burnout and how did you come out of it? And, especially since you hit that before it became more of a cliche, or term or more,
Buzzword, yeah.
yeah.
Before the world became a gigantic apocalypse and everyone probably
Yes.
experienced burnout in 2020. So the organization I started was, again, it was right place, right time. And because girl on girl bullying was in the national spotlight, in the international spotlight, huge partnership opportunities came forward with, you know, the biggest organizations you can think of, the biggest foundations you can think of, and they all wanted a piece of it. And it was just me and a bunch of interns that transitioned out every semester. And then I had a board of directors and I had an advisory board. So to meet the demand was very hard. We created a series of workbooks and sold that through retailers as a way to kind of, hit that demand button. But everyone wanted a piece of me. I would train facilitators and I would send facilitators out here in Phoenix to implement our after school workshop. And I would get nasty calls from school board members. They wanted to see me. They didn't want to see a facilitator. They wanted to see me. It got to the point where, I mean, I was a media darling, have radio vans waiting outside my complex that I lived in for me to come by and give them a soundbite of something that some new bill hit Capitol Hill and they wanted a soundbite of me. And it was uncontrollable. It was manageable. It just became too big for one person to manage. So, and just because everybody wanted a part of it didn't mean that it was, sustainable or financially, I don't even know the right word to use there. Running a nonprofit is actually fairly expensive. So, yeah, I burned out, gave everything over to the board of directors and the advisory board, told them to continue working on it. And I took 2 months to be at peace, turned off my phone, turned off my computer, and sat in my hometown in Wisconsin where internet access was not good. Didn't matter because I wasn't using my computer anyway, but you know, big pine trees, big clouds. And I sat on the back porch and watched, the clouds roll by for weeks on end until my brain stopped and until I could exhale, put some space in my body, and really start to look at how I got into this place of when I turned around, I was like 50 pounds heavier. I was totally unhappy. Hadn't been on a date since I created the organization. Hadn't really talked to a girlfriend about anything outside work in God knows how long. And I had to detach me from the organization. It was like it had become skin. And I healed that through a lot of talks with God, a lot of journaling, a lot of screaming, a lot of crying, a lot of allowing. And then literally the big thing that I did, and I talk about this in my book, as entrepreneurs, it is really easy for us to create our life around our business. Like business comes first, everything else is second. That's what had happened to me. But nothing else but business mattered because I mean, I was working like 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day. It was stupid. During my burnout recovery, what I decided to do was create a list of non negotiables. These were the things that had to matter. These were the things that I had to put in my day in order for me to be present in my day, not the business, me. And so it was a long list. And it was things like fun, exercise, meditation, and then it got down to things like glitter, because I figured if I was going to create a new life, I had to do things that I hadn't ever done before. I had to literally like get off of the computer and do things with my hands. And, I was looking at all sorts of things, painting, journaling with glitter pens, and that's what I did. And I feel like that list of non negotiables is probably what helped me get out of it because I protected my mental health moving forward. So I didn't let calls come into my calendar before 10 a.m. I stopped at 5. I recreated the organization. We moved from a B2C to a B2B. Um, it's not like it happened overnight. You don't get into burnout overnight. You definitely don't get out of it overnight. But I became dedicated to it because I couldn't continue going the way that I had.
Thank you for that vulnerability and sharing that, Carrie, of just everything, all the work that you had to do. And that's not easy. And it takes a lot of courage to recognize it and make that decision of saying, I'm taking 2 months off. How did you arrive to that? Like, was it just like, did you have a nervous breakdown? Was it
Oh,
something physical? Like at what point? Because that has to be really hard. This is your baby. This is your business. It's grown so fast. You've reached this success. How do you walk away from that and say, I don't know where it's going, but I need to put myself first?
I had such resentment for it at that point because I had totally lost myself. When I walk into a Starbucks and our after school program was called the Supergirl program. And I would walk into a Starbucks and people would be like, oh, there's the Supergirl lady. Like folks didn't even know my name. They just knew what I had created. And at that point, I was partnered with government organizations and would show up and give, workshops to city employees. And because I was the front of it, I also took the heat of it. And so if they were like, why aren't you doing this for boys? Why aren't you doing this for incarcerated women? Why aren't you doing this for stem cell, STEM research? Why aren't you doing this for blah, blah, blah? it got to the point where my responses were like borderline heated, where, well, I know what it's like to grow up as a girl. I don't know what it's like to grow up as a boy. Maybe you should do, like I definitely it had turned resentful. In fact, when I sat down to heal, and it wasn't overnight, but I journaled a lot through that. The thing that helped me, and I write about this as well, was I would feel into the emotion I could recognize. Resentment was like right there. And
Hmm.
why am I resentful? And I actually write about this. I resent how much my life is taken up by my job. The next one, what would my life look like without resentment? I'd feel lighter. I wouldn't have to work as hard. And then it just kept on going. Every emotion that I felt, I would claim the reason why I felt it, what would happen if it weren't there, and why I want to do this. So when it came to walking away for 2 months, as soon as I started doing this exercise and started going down this rabbit hole of all these different emotional flavors I could feel, I knew I couldn't go back until I no longer felt angry, resentful, shameful, guilty, all those negative, low vibrational feelings. I didn't want those anymore. So I would go back once. I felt feminine. I felt happy. I was at peace. I knew I had clarity. I knew what direction to go in. Because here's the thing about burnout: once you're in it, so many people are like, oh, I'm tired. I'm burnt out. I'm going to take a week off. It doesn't matter. As soon as you go back to it, unless you've done the work to get out of it, you're right back in it. I didn't want to end up back there. So I took 2 months off. Actually, I had a one-way ticket to my childhood home. I didn't buy a one-way ticket back until I felt like I was ready. So it just happened to be 8 weeks. But yeah, a lot happened in 8 weeks.
I'm amazed at your level of awareness and taking yourself through those exercises, because I think anyone else that would have been put in that position might have ended up, I don't know, in therapy or with some health crisis, like nervous breakdown, depression. It's like it really is recognizing those symptoms of like you did, with the emotions. Like, I'm feeling resentful. I'm feeling like this is not who I am. Like, why am
Mhm.
I responding this way? Why am I feeling guilty? Why am I feeling shame? Why am I feeling resentful? Why am I feeling, and that takes again, a certain level of courage and awareness. Like it really, it lies in your awareness of like questioning it, and then taking the next step and saying, I'm going to do something about it. Because if not, it will lead into some health issue, a cancer, like a nervous breakdown and having to go into the hospital, severe depression, whatever it is. So I commend you for being able to spot that, like almost like take yourself out, of your body, take that 6,000 foot view and say, this is what I need. That is pretty amazing, Carrie, just to hear that story. What do you do with these emotions that are so universal, of like, whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, because you're going through burnout or you're going through something else, like what I'm getting from this conversation is, ooh, when my emotions are lingering too long, because it's okay. There's no one's happy every single minute of the day, every single day of the week. Like we do go through ups and downs. But if you're lingering too much in that guilt, if you're lingering too much in that shame and that resentment, fill in the blank, whatever the negative emotion is, what
Mhm.
do you recommend our listeners do, like to pay attention to that, and be able to become at that level of awareness that you were at?
So at the back of my book, I have all these exercises that I actually did during that time. I have always been a very self-aware person. My friends actually I used to throw dinner parties and like I would have like exercises for us to do on little note cards, or I'd have questionnaires or something. And so whenever my friends came over for dinner parties, they were like, it's a personal development party. This isn't like a cocktail party. I'm fascinated by that. I mean, I've been that way forever. So one of the exercises I did and recommend here is like I call it a self-exam for personal growth. It's recognizing how we're showing up. So if we have that feeling of resentment, if we have that feeling of anger, control, micromanaging, whatever, looking at why I feel this way, and what would happen. So our emotions have two sides, right? If I'm worried, I'm worried because of a story that I'm telling myself. On the opposite side of worry or fear is peace. Why would I choose worry over peace, right? And so it's recognizing a single emotion and then what's on the opposite side of it. Literally flip the coin and see what's there and why you can't choose that one. And that's the growth piece, is seeing the bridge between, am I going to allow myself to put this worry down and be at peace? Yes or no? And so one of the in the back of my book, I don't know if you can see this, but like I have all these,
Words, a list of words.
I have a list of words of like, how are you showing up? And then how do you choose to show up? What can you choose instead of this? Yeah, I do that actually. My To this day, my husband does it too. We recognize things that are happening in the moment and how can you choose something different?
That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go back a little bit on your story. You haven't shared about this, but I know it. I know that you pitched 100 literary agents and
Mhm,
received 77 rejection letters.
mhm.
And then that's when you launched your publishing house.
Yeah.
How do you deal with rejection? I mean, this goes for so many of us. So many of us will procrastinate because we don't want to be rejected, because we don't want to fail. And this is just so amazing. And I think it's an important point, of how you dealt with that. Like with every other letter that you'd get, how would you pick yourself up and say, no, I have to keep going?
The fact that I was being compared to Elizabeth Gilbert, Brene Brown, Glennon Doyle, Gabby Bernstein, I got those 4 ladies more than anything else. And then I never bought it. I never was like, I think my writing is super vulnerable. I think it's totally heartfelt. I think that's how I show up. And I think it's really, really great. I think those women are phenomenal. The fact that I was being compared to New York Times bestselling authors was definitely a motivator to continue pitching. So I pitched and I pitched and I pitched. I would see, I would get, I had a great query letter, I had a great proposal. Agents loved the work. The most like disheartening one, the disheartening ones came from, I had gotten to know the agent. I really wanted to work with them. I actually still am in touch with a couple of them because this book is doing so well that they're like, "Are you writing a second one?" And the fact that like production companies, Hello Sunshine has a copy, Shondaland has a copy. And if it ever does get into a point where I'm talking about deals and things, I would want somebody to help me. But the disheartening rejections came when I had to go through exercises, right? Like a disappointment happens, I'm heartbroken, and I had to pick myself back up and to continue. And to do that, I would turn to the exercises I knew how to do. Like one of the things I would always do is like write down 10 lessons or 10 reasons why God doesn't want me here. And I would write those out. And then pretty soon it became like write down 50 reasons why this didn't happen. Or again, I always turned to personal growth and would look inward to the reason why something better came along. So one day, it was 2018, I had, I pitched a ton of companies, ton of agents, and I woke up and I got this intuitive nudge to just go out and be the house, just go out and create your own thing. Having experienced burnout already and knowing what it takes to launch a business, I was like, oh, totally not doing that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to start another business. I'm not going to start a publishing house. That's crazy. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I've never really, I mean, the demand was there. It's not like I'm trying to go out and disrupt an industry or anything. It's just the demand was there for people like me. And so that was my why. I felt like I had been rejected so many times so that I could do this. This was the thing I had to turn my attention to, you know?
It's one of those cases. Do you feel like Steve Jobs would say, you can't connect the dots moving forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. Do you
Totally.
feel that that was a blessing now, that you ended up starting your, like you're almost grateful that you got all those rejections because you started your own publishing company?
Yeah. I look at that. I feel that way about, I was just thinking of this right before this call. I think that's the case for me about, I burned out so long ago. And had my book been accepted and picked up and published traditionally back in 2016 when I first had it wouldn't have hit the same way it's hitting now, because I think women are in a very different place than they are now. Burnout is something that, I mean, I'm being asked to speak at healthcare conferences because of this. There's no way that would have happened back then. It's, perspective, right? Like,
Yeah.
it sucks going through it. There's a reason it happened. It may not become apparent right away, but it always does. Something,
Yeah.
it's happening for you, not to you, all that stuff. We all know that, right?
Yeah, and
You
it's
just
such a great example to your plans and divine plans. Like
right.
sometimes we think our plans are the best plans, because we thought them out and this is what I want. And I
I
have this
know.
huge desire and I have this goal. And it's like, yeah, it could work out and I could give it to you. The universe could be like, yeah, I could give it to you, but hey, I have a much bigger plan for you that you have
Yep.
no idea that's going to blow off your socks, so that's awesome that you can look at it that way. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Harry, I could talk to you all day and keep asking questions, and I would love to go to one of your parties. That seems like so myself, and my husband would make fun of it. He'd be like, oh my God, you're being so nerdy. Like, why are we doing self-development exercises at our gathering? So any other time that you have one of your parties, I could be one of your guests. I would
Okay, that
love
sounds
coming to
great.
your parties with
That sounds great.
self-development and exercises. So where could people find you, Carrie?
Unapologeticallyenough.com. There's a contact form. You can join my list and get a hold of me, contact me that way. I'm all over social media, but the easiest way is unapologeticallyenough.com.
Perfect. We'll put that in the notes.
Thank you.
And what would be two quick and practical action steps that our listeners could take, or that you would recommend our listeners to live a life with more courage and be able to
Number one
follow their
would
dreams?
be, first one would be to understand your definition of success. If it's given to you or if it's something that you're creating day to day. And the second one would be to understand your definition of enough and live from that place.
I love that. Your definition of enough. Because
Yeah,
I always use the one of success, but I have not done the exercise of what is enough.
it's a good one because depending on where your mindset is, we could be looking at enough from a place of lack, right? Like enough is just covering my bills, enough is just having enough, whatever. But now, if you actually look at I mean, enough is abundant. It is full. It is satisfied. It is peace. It's very different, when you're able to give yourself the space, take a deep breath and, go inward.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thanks for your time
Thank
today
you.
with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
I am so grateful that you joined me today. If you enjoyed it, there's one thing I'd like you to do. Click on the follow button so you don't miss a single episode. Leave me a rating and a review, and please share. As my way to thank you, email us a screen grab of your review at the email in the show notes, and we will send you a free Crafting Your Future guided visualization, which is so simple to do with outstanding results. It will empower you and give you the confidence to attract and create the life you've always desired. See you in our next episode.